Welcome to VidZet. I'm Dr. Ted Noel. Before I get started, please take the time to go visit our store. This is how we pay for all of the things that are involved in making these broadcasts available to you. Now, all of us are familiar with Kathy Griffin's severed head stunt. We're aware that she put out this horrible picture of her holding the president's head, blood dripping over the face, all this nonsense. And she thought it was funny. After all, she's a comic. Then she realized, and in her apology she said, well, I didn't realize that it wasn't funny until I saw the reaction of certain people. Well, guess what? You do something that vile, and it will get a reaction. You're just stuck with it. She also was objecting to the fact that Barron Trump, who's 11 years old, sees this picture, and he is worried that his dad is not doing well. His dad's been hurt. So, this is somebody on the left who just didn't think and went way, way beyond the pale of anything civilized. In any case, then later on, she tried to turn this around into a beatdown by Donald Trump on her. She played the victim card. Well, guess what, Kathy? You aren't a victim. You did this. It was awful, and you are suffering the consequences of your own actions. But in the way you said things, you revealed something you didn't intend to reveal, and it really tells us a lot about how your side of the political spectrum thinks. Now, the key here is, she said, and I quote, "So many people have expressed to me personally at my shows across the country that they're scared." Scared of what? That I'm not going to buy tickets to her show? That's the only thing I'm ever going to do. I'm going to ignore her. But no, these people are scared. Her audience is scared. Kathy's the only one who suffered a consequence, not her audience. But what we have to look at is that these people have a real existential fear. That is, they are afraid that their life is in jeopardy somehow in this. Now, this is a form of insanity, because as we know, it's a psychosis, and a psychosis is a complete radical failure of reality testing. I mean, the exact definition is a severe mental disorder in which thought and emotions are so impaired that contact is lost with external reality. Somebody is sitting out there thinking that we are going to go after them with a lock on a chain the way they went after a peaceful protester who was supporting Donald Trump. They have an existential fear. And you have to go, where the heck is that coming from? I mean, when Obama was president, we didn't go out there and riot and break things and hurt people. No, we tried to figure out how to cope with the situation and how we go about changing it so he can't do as much harm as he's been doing. But what they've got is something that Jonathan Haidt, now it's spelled H-A-I-D-T, points out when he studies the minds of left and right. Now, Jonathan Haidt is a professor of psychology, so he knows the kinds of things he's talking about. And he points out that the left's worldview looks at three axes of moral behavior. That is, they look first and foremost on care versus harm, then on fairness versus cheating, and finally on liberty versus oppression. Okay? The problem is that those are only three axes. There are 6 major axes of moral behavior. The other 3 are sanctity versus degradation, authority versus subversion, and loyalty versus betrayal. And people on the right generally spend their lives looking at all 6 axes and balancing them in a dynamic sense so that their lives are in balance. When something gets out of balance, we recognize it and we try to bring it back. But let's put this in other language. The left's primary concern could be said needs. Somebody needs something. Fairness and liberty are secondary, and in practice, they serve as tools to support needs. It's not fair that this guy doesn't get what he needs. We've all heard that. The right doesn't do that. The problem is that while we appreciate that need can be best answered by looking at things like duty, honor, industry, virtue, and so on, the left is ordinarily unable to understand that these are the ways that you make things better. They just don't get it. They don't understand, or are unable to understand. And remember, they're unable, probably as much by choice as by anything else, to understand that these are the things that create the rising tide that lifts all boats. If you are making more widgets for a better price because you're industrious, guess what? Somebody who needs a widget gets it at a lower price. That benefits them. The left can't see that. They can't hear it. They can't talk about it. It doesn't exist. What the radical left demands is virtue signaling. He needs food. I will supply food, food stamps, whatever else. They are so involved in the virtue signaling that the very idea that you express that you understand the need is all that they ever do. That you don't ever have to fix the need. You don't ever have to do anything of that sort. All you have to do is, oh, I'm sorry, it's so bad. We'll get together and sing Kumbaya around the campfire, and we will pray that you get the food. We won't grow the food. We won't do the baking. We will just say, oh, it's so bad that you need it. And that's all they do. But here's the thing. Anyone who doesn't act in accordance with their need for need becomes an attack on them. And it's not an attack on ideas, because they don't work in ideas. They work in the emotion of need. When you attack their ideas, they see it as a personal attack on them. It is an existential attack on their survival. This is something that you cannot describe otherwise. It is a threat. And of course, if I'm threatening, I'm a guy on the right, and I threaten you as a person on the left because this threat is a threat to my life, well, at least they see it that way. They have a self-defense right to use lethal force against me to remove that threat. Now, remember, because their response is purely emotional, proportionality doesn't exist. Proportionality is an issue of ideas. And ideally, if I were to say, you're wrong, the answer is to come back and say, no, you're wrong, and explain why. That's a proportional response. Instead, their proportional response is tip over a car, burn a building, break windows, hurt people. Why do they do that? Because the people that they see on that other side are hurting them, so they get to hurt as much as they want to make themselves feel better. It's irrational and it's criminal. Microaggressions create macro responses. There's no rational basis for what they do. It's pure emotion. Why should a left-winger listen to Donald Trump and the First Lady's tweets, which basically say, shame on you, and take it as a threat? We're not threatening anything of that sort. We simply don't think that way. All we want is for Kathy Griffin to recognize that she did something that is just plain vile. It's hurtful, and that she should apologize for it, ask for forgiveness, and straighten up and fly right. That's it. We're not looking for anything else. We're not going to go down there, take away her food, take away her house. We're not going to stick a knife in her throat. We're not going to do any of that stuff. The worst we're going to do is once she says mea culpa, is we're not going to buy tickets to her show. That's it. But Kathy Griffin and the radical left cannot hear that message. They're not capable of hearing it. They personify the apocryphal comment back when Richard Nixon was elected, where one news person said, "I can't understand how Nixon won. I don't know anybody who voted for him." They're in a bubble, and that bubble is impervious to the people who think in those three dimensions of moral behavior that they can't even see or hear. So we cannot penetrate their bubble. In large measure, we shouldn't even try. They have isolated themselves into an area where they cannot survive without our help. And so maybe what the best thing is for us to do is to simply back off and say, we're not paying for it. You know, you figure out how you can pay for it, but we're not paying for it. We already know that in states that have instituted a work requirement for food stamps, a vast majority of the people who are on food stamps suddenly get off of them. Interesting. When the radical left is required to be responsible, not by me telling them, but by simple action, all of a sudden they learn that there's more out there than just their anger. Let me say this again. The radical left has reached a point in their own minds where they are in mortal danger anytime you or I say anything contrary to what they believe. You should be ashamed gets translated into your concert venue will be smashed and burned. Your fans will be assaulted with bicycle locks and broken bottles. And if we can get our hands on you, you may assume room temperature. To the left, that's a proportional response. To the right, all we do is say, we're not going to buy your concert tickets. But Kathy Griffin says, you shouldn't shut up or silence a comic. Really? What about Milo Yiannopoulos, Ann Coulter, Ayaan Hirsi Ali? These are right-wing commentators who often are quite funny, and you silenced them. You prevented them from speaking at all. We don't prevent you from speaking, we just don't buy your tickets. Oh, and by the way, what about Bill Maher? He used what nowadays is considered a racist comment. If you actually look at the historical context of what he said, he spoke correctly. But because he's on the left, you give him a pass. Because you know he's safe. He's not an existential threat to you. Michael Savage was right. Liberalism is a mental disorder. I'm Dr. Ted Noel. Thanks for watching.